If you want to know whether a marriage will end in divorce, you don't need to audit their bank accounts.
Right.
You don't need to interview their friends. According to relationship researchers, you only need to watch them fight for about 15 minutes.
Which is wild.
It is. The predictors of total collapse are usually right there, hiding in plain sight.
And the terrifying part, they are not the loud, dramatic betrayals we picture. They are the quiet, mundane, almost invisible resentment that pile up over years of shared life.
That's the invisible rot, and it grows in a very specific place, what Shakari calls the strange middle ground.
The place most of us actually live. Not quite passive, not quite asserting ourselves either. Just swallowing the small irritations to keep the peace.
And buying that peace has a price.
Buying peace today by swallowing a grievance is like putting your relationship on a credit card. You get the harmony now, but the emotional interest compounds. Eventually, the debt gets too big and the foundation gives way.
You're listening to Paya Talks. Big ideas, both sides, real depth from Paya Academy.
I'm Dr. Farzian.
And I'm Sophia. Today's question: when resentment is quietly rotting a relationship, what actually saves it? Better communication or deeper inner work? It comes from Chapter 6 of The Life Skills Gap by clinical psychologist Layla Shaakari on the conversations we avoid.
I'll argue a script can't save a crumbling foundation. You have to handle the nervous system and the deep psychology first.
And I'll argue the opposite, that a rigorous communication structure is exactly what gets the resentment out before it destroys everything. Let's get into it. Let me lay out the framework first. Shaakari's tool is the clean complaint, an adaptation of Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication. 4 steps: observation, feeling, need, request. I'd argue this structure is the ultimate release valve. It lets you make small, safe assertions, so the grievances never get the chance to pile up and blow.
I hear it, but I fundamentally disagree that a script can save a crumbling foundation. Survival hinges on what's happening inside the body and the mind first.
Let's test that against how these things actually explode, because I think the lack of structure is what causes the rot. Take Hannah, Shaakari's opening case. 12 years biting her tongue about who does the housework. She picks up the socks, does the dishes, swallows the irritation. And then, one ordinary Tuesday, her husband makes a totally mild comment about how she's chopping the bell peppers.
And the credit card bill comes due.
Massively. She wheels around. Maybe if you cared enough to ever cook anything yourself, you could chop the peppers however you wanted.
Ouch.
Right. And look at the anatomy of that. I'd say her failure was purely a lack of framework. Because she had no safe, structured way to voice the frustration over the years, it came out as a sweeping attack on his character. If she'd had the clean complaint, she could have made one specific observation about the labor split months, years, earlier. The structure is preventative medicine.
I'm sorry, but I don't buy that. And here's why. The pressure valve story works on the surface, but it ignores the biology. After 12 years in that middle ground, Hannah's steam wasn't just hot air anymore. It had turned toxic. When she said, maybe if you cared enough, she wasn't just picking bad words. That was Gottman's first horseman, criticism.
Isn't criticism just a badly phrased complaint?
No, it's a mutation. A complaint is about an action. You didn't empty the dishwasher. Criticism is an attack on identity. You never help because you're fundamentally selfish. That's the real danger of the middle ground. Over time, your brain rewires how you see your partner. A fair grievance about behavior slowly hardens into a permanent verdict on their character.
But the framework stops that verdict from forming.
Does it? Shaakari points out that criticism almost automatically produces defensiveness. Because Hannah's husband isn't defending the peppers, he's defending who he is. A tool can change the words she uses. It doesn't cure the fact that she started to see him as an uncaring person.
Here's where I think you're missing the mechanism. The framework doesn't mask the inner regulation. It forces it. Step 1. Observation. You state what happened, stripped of all interpretation and judgment. Not, you ignored me all night, but you were looking at your phone for the last hour of dinner.
Which is incredibly hard for an angry person to do.
Exactly. And that difficulty is the point. Forcing yourself into that constraint changes your mental state. It's a brake on the runaway train in your head. The moment you make your brain separate the fact from the story you're spinning, you're dismantling that character verdict you're so worried about. Then step 2, the feeling. Not, you made me feel abandoned, but I felt lonely. That tiny shift forces you to own your emotion. It makes hidden blame impossible. The script isn't just a way to talk to your partner. It's a therapy you run on yourself.
A therapy that depends entirely on the thinking brain being online. And that's where communication first hits a wall. Look at the fourth horseman, stonewalling. Shakari explains it isn't just stubborn silence, it's a physical event. Hit someone with criticism or intense conflict and their threat system sounds the alarm. Gottman calls it flooding. Stress chemistry surges, heart rate spikes past 100 beats a minute, and blood flow literally drains away from the thinking brain into the arms and legs for fight or flight.
So the logic center goes dark.
Completely dark. You lose access to the part of you that can even process a framework. You can deliver the most flawless, clean complaint about the dishwasher. It doesn't matter. Your partner's brain is offline. They can't hear your observation versus your evaluation. You cannot talk your way out of a stress surge.
I'll concede the flooding. But Shakari gives the remedy right in the text, and it actually proves my point. The fix for stonewalling isn't silence. The flooded partner has to notice it and say, I need 15 minutes to settle down, and then we'll come back to this. That's a structured communication tool. You use the framework of a request to manage the biology.
But I need a break is the tiniest part of that. The real work is noticing your own rising heart rate, catching the physical signs of panic, and actively calming your system back to baseline. Skip that deeper work during the break, and the 15 minutes is just a pause before the next explosion.
So you're saying structured communication is useless if the body's agitated?
Not useless. Secondary, it's new tires on a car with a blown engine. Take the deadliest horseman, contempt. Gottman calls it the single strongest predictor of divorce. The eye rolling, the sneer, the mocking sarcasm. Contempt is a settled belief of disgust, the conviction that your partner is beneath you. And Shakari is explicit. You can't fix contempt with behavior. You can't just instruct someone to stop rolling their eyes. The eye roll is a symptom. Your partner hears the contempt anyway, no matter how perfect your syntax.
So what's the cure?
A deep psychological audit. You have to sit down and ask, why have I decided that this person I love is contemptible? What insecurity in myself am I hiding by acting superior? No 4 steps script does that heavy lifting for you.
And here's where I fully disagree. You keep treating the inner audit and the communication tool as opposing forces. My argument is that the framework is the excavation tool. Look at step 3, the underlying need. We both agree getting out of the middle ground means addressing the root. The debate is how you find it. In step 3, you connect the feeling to a specific unmet need. Sha'akari says negative emotions are alarm bells for needs that are starving. So, I felt angry when you chopped the peppers that way, because I need to feel that my domain in this house is respected. Or, I felt lonely because I need visible partnership. being forced to answer, what is my actual need here? That is the psychological audit you say it skips. The tool builds the self-awareness.
If they find the real need, Shakari warns that step 3 is the hardest of the 4 and the one people skip most.
Because we've spent our whole adult lives in that middle ground, conditioned to believe that having needs makes us a burden.
Exactly. So we're cut off from what we actually want, and someone who hasn't done the inner work just plugs a fake need into the formula. I felt angry when you chopped the peppers because I have a need for the peppers to be chopped correctly. That's not excavation, that's criticism wearing the costume of therapy speak.
That's weaponized NVC, which is a misuse of the tool, not a flaw in its design.
But the misuse proves my point. If step 3 is the most skipped and step 3 decides whether the whole thing works, then success depends entirely on the psychological depth you already had walking in. If you haven't done the lonely, painful work to know that your rage about the dishes is really an old wound about feeling invisible, before you open your mouth, the framework collapses. It demands self-awareness. It doesn't hand it to you.
It absolutely hands it to you. If you use it as a diagnostic instead of a weapon, you're picturing it only in the heat of battle. But Shakari suggests a reflection practice. Take one lingering resentment from your middle ground and map it backwards onto the 4 steps.
A postmortem.
Exactly. And when people actually try to write out their clean complaint, they discover their observation is a tangled mess of accusations. They realize they don't even know what their need is. They hit a wall, but the wall is illuminating. The very act of trying to force your messy anger into the clean structure makes you see your own distortions. And by step 4, the specific request, you realize how unfair you've been. You can't ask, "Can you just respect me more?" That's not actionable. The framework forces, "Could we spend 20 minutes on Sunday planning the week together?" You're translating vague, toxic distress into something you can actually build on.
I'll grant the diagnostic reflection. It does force you to look in the mirror.
And that's why the structure is the primary fix. Without it, we stay trapped in our own heads, assuming our partner can read our minds, then resenting them when they can't. The framework drags the problem out of the shadows and puts it on the table where it can actually be solved.
The clean complaint is a brilliant vehicle. I won't dispute that. But a vehicle still needs an engine to move. And the engine of a relationship is emotional and physiological regulation. If your nervous system is flooded or you're seeing your partner through contempt, that beautiful vehicle just sits in the garage.
You need both, but you can't build the engine while the car is crashing.
True. And if the engine's dead, steering won't help either. You have to dismantle the contempt and manage the flooding first. That inner work is the non-negotiable foundation. Without it, the 4 steps are just a polite performance while the building burns.
We've drawn the lines starkly, but I think we've actually landed on solid common ground.
We have. However you get there, structure first or psychology first, we both align completely with Shakari's warning about the strange middle ground.
That credit card metaphor you opened with is exactly right. We're taught that keeping things in is polite, that our passivity is a virtue, a way of keeping the peace. Shakari exposes that for the lie it is. Swallowing grievances isn't peace, it's toxic postponement.
And the bill always comes due, usually like Hannah in the kitchen, attached to the wrong trigger, in the wrong tone, with catastrophic interest. Whether you call that explosion a failure of communication or the final mutation of psychological rot, the destination is the same: destructive aggression.
And avoiding that, learning to assert our needs without blowing up our connections, is the defining work of adult life.
It's an uncomfortable chapter. It forces you to look at your own ledger, your long, quiet list of unsaid things, and ask what kind of interest has been quietly accumulating.
So, here's the one to sit with. Look honestly at the stress fractures in your own relationships and ask, what's the right first step? The disciplined structure of a clean complaint? Or a rigorous internal audit of your own triggers and hidden judgments?
Or, as it usually is in real life, the messy work of both at once.
We started by saying 15 minutes of watching can predict a collapse. The unsettling truth is how visible the invisible rot really is. But the hope in Shukri's work is this: it doesn't have to be fatal. You have the tools, structural or psychological, to inspect your own foundation and catch the fractures before the whole thing gives way.
If you want to sit with this properly, it's chapter 6 of The Life Skills Gap by Leila Shakiri, with more on having the hard conversations over at Paya Academy.
That's it for this episode of Paya Talks. Next time, we keep going. Another idea from the life skills gap, and another question worth sitting with.
Until then, keep safe.